Hey, Famous and Gravy listeners, Michael Osborne here. As you may have noticed, we have been re-releasing a number of episodes from our back catalog. We have a very exciting announcement that will be coming out very soon. In fact, the next episode up on this feed will, I think, answer a lot of questions. In the meantime, we have one more episode from our back catalog. This was actually one of our most requested episodes, and it's easily one of our most popular. I know I came away from the research on this person with a completely different point of view. I hope you enjoy it. Please stay tuned, and let's get right to it. This person died 2016, age 69. In 1973, he abruptly announced his retirement.
That was when I was born. I wasn't there for the retirement announcement.
It didn't stick.
Gene Wilder?
Not Gene Wilder. In the mid-1970s, he made pro-fascist pronouncements that he would later disown.
I'm not getting it.
In the 1980s, he had a Broadway run in the demanding title role character of the Elephant Man.
Was Abe Vigoda in The Elephant Man?
Not Abe Vigoda, but boy, what a good guess. His son is a director best known for the 2009 film Moon, starring Sam Rockwell.
Oh, I've seen that.
John Hurt?
Not John Hurt. He suffered a blow in a teenage brawl that caused his left pupil to be permanently dilated.
That doesn't help.
Rip Torn.
Not Rip Torn. I really want to do him on the show. He experimented with startling transformations, often playing up an androgynous image. He was the Thin White Duke, Major Tom, and Ziggy Stardust.
Oh, crap. David Bowie.
David Bowie, right?
David Bowie?
Today's dead celebrity is David Bowie.
Oh my God!
Yet another David Bowie. Is this the real one this time?
Well, I think so, yes.
Why did you change so often? I mean, what was the need for it? Was it just a gimmick?
Being a Capricorn, I didn't want to expose myself to the public, so I developed a series of characters which fell in line with the material that I was writing.
So did the roles that you played on stage then kind of take you over sometimes into private life?
Yeah.
So you're not, this is really you. This is not you just still sort of playing the role of...
One wonders. The role often carries over, so they all built up and became a mess.
So behind that all the time was a real David Bowie?
At times, yes.
Welcome to Famous and Gravy. I'm Michael Osborne.
And I'm Amit Kapoor.
And on this show, we choose a celebrity who died in the last 10 years and review their quality of life. We go through a series of categories to figure out the things in life that we would actually desire, and ultimately answer the question, would I want that life? Today, David Bowie died 2016, age 69.
Whew, it's a big one.
I think it's the biggest.
The biggest?
I think he's the most famous person we've done on the show. I thought about this.
Okay.
Fame, to me, is not just recognizability or recognition.
It's people who sing a song called Fame.
Well, that helps. It's also depth of connection with the masses.
Okay.
When I made this argument with Allison, and she's
Your
like,
wife, for
my
new
wife.
listeners out there.
Right. She said, what about Nelson Mandela? And I'm like, we don't know him that much. He may be more known in the history books. Same thing with Muhammad Ali. Same thing with Neil Armstrong. But in terms of feeling like the masses know him, if we're talking a kind of breadth and depth quality to fame,
Yes.
then I think David Bowie is the most famous person we've yet done on Famous and Great.
You've hit upon an interesting formula. The breadth times depth equals fame.
Category 1, grading the first line of their obituary. David Bowie, the infinitely changeable, fiercely forward-looking songwriter who taught generations of musicians about the power of drama, images, and personas, died on Sunday, 2 days after his 69th birthday.
Interesting.
Yeah, that last tag?
That last tag, but the lack of proper nouns. Normally who launched to fame is Ziggy Stardust.
Yeah.
Best known for Space Oddity, something like that.
On some level, looks kind of short. I think that this is going to take a minute to dissect.
Can we start with the adjective chugfest at the beginning?
Infinitely changeable.
And then following that?
Fiercely forward-looking songwriter who taught generations of musicians about the power of drama, images, and personas.
Okay, I want to talk about the ICFF.
ICF. Okay.
And-
Infinitely changeable, fiercely forward.
Yeah, and then taught.
Yeah.
So infinitely changeable, no doubt about it.
Yes.
Right, that's going to come up throughout this episode.
Correct.
He reinvented different personalities to hide behind or embrace or bring about, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah.
Fiercely forward-looking.
Yes. Like he is looking to the next thing as soon as he finished the last thing.
Or while he's in the current thing, he's already looking
Yeah,
fiercely
maybe.
ahead.
Maybe he's one way or another. I think that is dead on accurate. Fiercely forward looking is, I think, extraordinarily well put. Songwriter, not performer, not pop star. That's sort of an interesting choice. I think maybe the right one. That's how he would describe himself.
Mm-hmm.
But, you and I have had conversations about like how he describes himself is not necessarily, what the obligation of us to describe him is. So,
Yes.
David Bowie, oh, you know him, the songwriter?
I think it's fine because they preceded it with infinitely changeable.
Yeah.
And so that already implies that he is more than the noun that we're going to modify.
Yeah. All right. But then I think the thing that you flagged a second ago, taught generations of
Yes,
musicians.
yes.
Yeah. That's an interesting word to use.
It's very active, right? I would expect influenced, but taught.
What is teaching? I guess, there's teaching that takes the form of modeling behavior, showing how it's done. And then there's teaching that is like actual direct instruction where, you kind of walk somebody through how you think about things or how you come up with ideas. I think the connotation here is the latter. I'm actually sort of impressed with it. If you're just reading this, you can kind of blast past that word and not notice taught generations, right?
It's bold.
It is bold.
It was a new year. They were like, this is 2016, motherfucking, I'm going to do this an active
You know what? He
verb.
taught generations about the power of drama, images, and personas. I mean, there's nothing in there about music, right? He taught generations of musicians about all these other things that surround music. That is extraordinarily well said. That the thing about Bowie is it's not just the music. It's all the stuff happening, the album artwork, the live performances, the characters he adopts, the theater of the thing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Wow. What
And
a,
then- and
what
then
a first line of an obituary.
And then the capstone died
2 days after his 69th birthday.
Why that? Why'd they put that in?
Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Like that he was a sex addict and they wanted to like throw in the number 69?
Okay, you said it. I didn't say it.
I
But
didn't
yeah.
say anything. I merely insinuated your 14-year-old
You
mind where it was
intuited
going.
Yeah. So, yeah. Why else mention 2 days after his 69th birthday? They don't play with that phrase. It's a whole separate sentence. I usually read it when we do these episodes, but usually it's not woven into the first line.
Yeah, I mean, because they did leave out the drug addiction and the sex addiction.
Yeah.
And this is perhaps a tasteful partial illusion.
I don't know why they made that decision. I mean, I guess it's...
Listen, we're dealing with a bold obituary writer here.
Apparently,
Perhaps
yeah.
one that we haven't dealt with before.
Like, if you slow down and pace yourself through it, there's like a lot going in here. It's dense.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I love brevity when they nail it.
Me too,
And
me
I
too.
love when they get creative and wordy.
Yeah.
And I don't like the middle ground. And I think they did pretty close to nailing it on the former.
Usually when you have brevity and economy, it's also got some real like creativity with the wordsmithing, with
Yes.
the actual verbiage, right? That is not here necessarily. There's no words that I haven't seen in 15 years and that I need to go to the dictionary to look up.
Yeah, so that perhaps maybe my demarcation as well. Very well and succinct, but, not perfect lyrically.
You know what I would say about this? Like, this is actually really good representation of Bowie. The meta of this first line of this obituary. I'm not talking about the sentence itself, but all the stuff that surrounds this sentence. It feels like appropriate to who David Bowie was. One last thing before we give our grades. David Bowie, not his real name. David Jones.
Yeah, and I think that the New York Times just honors that.
I think that's right. I think it's like what we know him for. Had they said David Jones, better known as David Bowie, we would have been like, what?
Yeah.
Most people wouldn't know
This
that.
is different, though, because his kids took the last name Jones.
He never officially changed it. He signed contracts to the end of his day, Davy Jones.
Yes.
Yeah. And the whole reason he changed it was because of the monkeys. All right, let's grade this son of a bitch. What do
Okay,
you, what do you got?
I'm giving it a 9. Love the brevity, miss a tiny bit of creativity.
I agree with that. I'm going to give it a 9 too, for exactly the same reasons. I also really like that the more I look at it, the more I see, which again, I think is very true to Bowie.
It's art.
It is art. Let's move on. Category 2, 5 things I love about you. Here, Amit and I work together to come up with 5 reasons why we love this person, why we want to be talking about them in the first place. Okay, I wrote picked up where the Beatles and Bob Dylan left off. I was thinking about the Beatles, which I think are the greatest rock band of all time. And that's not just because of the musical output, but it's also because of the musical journey. That one of the things that's so exciting about the Beatles, even to this day, is to watch the progression and sophistication of songwriting and orchestration and everything, album to album. You see this major leap from Help to Rubber Soul to Revolver to Sgt. Pepper's. It's like each time they're trying to one-up themselves. You can contrast that with what most bands do, like the Rolling Stones, where they get a little bit more adventurous, but it's pretty conservative in terms of their music writing approach. The Beatles are different, and Dylan was different, especially in the 1960s and into the 70s. Like, he's reinventing himself album to album. I think when the Beatles break up in the late 60s and when, Bob Dylan has sort of gone electric and he's not as much in favor, there's a little bit of a void there in terms of who is going to pick up this mantle of what it looks like to evolve album to album. And I think Bowie's entire career is nothing but that. Every album is a surprise and an adventure. Some of them fucking suck. And I don't love all of them. But I do think that there is this legacy that was created that, like, would rock and roll be important and, like, would it evolve after the 1960s? And I think Bowie carries that legacy forward.
I'm closer to the golden dawn. Chimes cut and you're looking old.
Do you think this was fierce foresight in that he sees an opening in bringing about this genre, this avant-garde style of music?
I think it's some serendipity. I mean, I think he's got all the right influences. He does some stuff in the 60s. Like, he doesn't break until he's 25 years old. And that's a little older for rock stars. Like, there are some albums in his early... And are you familiar with the whole Laughing Gnome thing?
I'm a laughing gnome and you can't catch me.
Kind of ridiculous. I mean, there is a hippy-dippy phase with Bowie. He doesn't really begin to break until Space Oddity. And then after that, it's like Man Who Sold the World, then Hunky Dory, then Ziggy Stardust. But so I think he's like grabbing from these things. I think that there's a combination of seeing a void and being the right man at the right time.
We had a humorous and sartorial edge on things, I think, that we felt was missing in rock. And we knew that there had to be something new. And hey, we're probably it. Yeah. I mean, we'd look around and say, well, hey, there ain't much else. It's all so boring. What do I want to see on a stage that would really make me excited? And I think we went about doing that.
Okay, so he picked up the baton.
So he picked up the baton. And I love that about him, and there's a sort of like little brother quality to that I'm just a very big fan of.
Okay, and I like what you said, that it's not, it wasn't entirely intentional. It was a mix of serendipity and style, that it was right time, right place.
The other thing is that he didn't, I don't think, recognize that. I heard him in an interview say, like, I never saw myself as part of that crowd. Like, I didn't feel like I belonged. And he's like, which is crazy, because from 72 to 76, I could not have been more of a rock star.
There was a real feeling of inadequacy in that era. I never really felt like a rock singer or rock star or whatever. And I always felt a little bit out of my element. Again, not from elitist things at all, is that I really didn't think I played as well as them.
He had it sounded to me like imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Anyway, that's my number one.
Okay. My number two, Power of Persuasion. So two stories that I came across that I both really, really liked have to do with Slash of Guns N' Roses and Lou Reed.
Yeah.
So Slash, so his relationship to Slash is he was actually a professional partner with Slash's mother, who was one of his costume designers. They later became intimate partners. They were lovers for a while.
Which isn't special for David Bowie.
No, there was a lot of them. Slash's mother calls up David Bowie at some point after Guns N' Roses is really, really rising, perhaps even past their peak, and was like, talk to him. And he basically convinces Slash to get off the hard stuff.
Yeah.
I think he had this gift of relatability because he wasn't this big powerhouse, loud voice. I think he had this relatability of saying, I see what you're seeing, and I've been there, and he used that for the right reasons.
Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails describes a similar experience.
They almost the same thing. Trent Reznor, again, got off the really hard stuff because of David Bowie.
Yeah.
And the other example was Lou Reed. So they went to dinner sometime in the mid-'70s, a group of them, including Bowie's wife at the time, his manager, and maybe head of a label, and they invited Lou Reed along, who had at that point sunset his musical career.
Yeah, Velvet Underground had not hit. I mean, Bowie actually is kind of credited with resurrecting Lou Reed to some extent.
And that's exactly my point. They point to this exact after-dinner conversation that, Bowie and Lou Reed are at a booth somewhere at some bar, and Bowie just talks them into coming out of retirement.
Yeah.
And in the biography I read, it said that this was a service to musicians and fans alike everywhere, that Bowie basically said, "You're not done yet."
Boy, that's really good. One bit of trivia on Lou Reed. So the saxophone on Walk on the Wild Side was played by the guy who taught Bowie saxophone as a teenager. Power of persuasion? What was it?
Power of persuasion through relatability.
Through relatability. Say more about why you love that.
If you can relate to somebody and hit that part of their heartstrings to say either, I understand you, I see you, but you're not seeing something that I'm seeing. And if you can do that with a level of believability, and in these two instances turn their life around for the better,
Yeah.
you've thereby changed two lives and cascaded down to the many other lives that they changed.
I guess to play
So
devil's,
I'm saying that's impact.
is there a good form of persuasion without relatability? I guess there's salesmanship.
I mean, there's carrots and there's sticks, and then there's,
Yeah.
I don't know what relatability is. Maybe it's hummus.
Yeah.
And
Probably hummus.
that's the smoothest, creamiest way of persuasion.
Sure. So thing number 2 is hummus? No.
in a certain way.
Yeah.
But that's you bring up a good point. Is there a form of persuasion that is good, that is not relatable?
Yeah.
And I think there is. I think there is tough love, which does work. And I think incentive also works.
Yeah.
And they're not bad. But this is a uniquely personal feature and attribute that is either gifted or cultivated that he had.
It kind of gets back to the word teach, too. The best form of instruction and teaching is like combining personal experience, which is, I think, ultimately what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. That's actually a pretty good segue to my number 3.
Okay.
This was my way of getting a lot in, but I wrote inner and outer space. Okay. I love that he is kind of a sci-fi rock star. And I'm not sure we have another one like it. Not in everything he does, but certainly with Space Oddity and Ziggy. And, Major Tom comes up again in Ashes to Ashes, which is a, 1979-ish hit. There's album Earthlings and Black Star. Like, I got to know a fair amount of the catalog. And every time Bowie goes into space, I'm kind of excited about it. Small bit of trivia. He's from the same town as H.G. Wells. I don't think that's coincidence. But I said inner space, too. I think that he creates creative opportunity through character. That he makes somebody up, or he decides to adopt a persona, and that there's space created inside between his creative soul and his creative core and the canvas, the persona platform that he's then creating upon. And I think that we are all doing a version of this. This is the Shakespeare quote, where life is a stage and we're all sort of performing characters. But he kind of went a level deeper with that. Even the name David Bowie, he's sort of performing David Bowie his whole life, right? And then characters that David Bowie creates. And I think part of the reason that he has a fan base that is so devoted and protective of him is that there's something about that act that gets at a deep feeling of alienation, that makes people who have a hard time feeling seen, feel seen.
If I've been at all responsible for people finding more characters in themselves than they originally thought they had, then I'm pleased, because that's something I feel very strongly about, that one isn't totally what one has been conditioned to think one is. That there are many facets of the personality which a lot of us have trouble finding.
I remember the first time I kind of became a little bit of a Bowie fan, because, we came about in the MTV era, and I didn't care for Bowie in the 1980s. I encountered him at exactly the worst time in his career, when some of the worst music he ever did, and I don't know. And the Bowie fans will point to that. So I was pretty dismissive of him for most of my, young life. Then I was traveling into New Zealand. I had this friend, Josh, who I really liked. We had all kinds of stuff to talk about. We worked at a building site together. And I remember one day he showed up and he was wearing a David Bowie t-shirt, and I gave him shit about him, like, Bowie? And I remember Josh looking at me going, Bowie's good, right? But I'm like, he is? Really? Bowie? That was when I first got turned on to all the early 70s stuff. And I've been approaching this episode as like, okay, I'm going to take this opportunity to get familiar with the rest of the catalog. And I've really been thinking about it as a bottle of wine. Now's the time to crack open the wine and get to know Bowie. And I would say over the course of getting ready for this episode that I've fallen in love with the guy. I mean, I've really fallen in love with the guy. And I think part of it is to this point about he understands some sort of inner loneliness, that he really speaks to the human condition in a profound way. I don't know if I love all of his music, Ahmed, but I get it now. I get why people feel the way they do about Bowie in a way I did not before.
Okay.
That's my number 3.
I have a lot to add to that, but this is Man in the Mirror stuff to me that I want to supplement your point.
Cannot wait for Man in the Mirror on this episode. You want to take number 4?
I'm going to go where I don't think you're going to go at all. And I'm going to go funny PR guy.
Right.
He was a PR genius at this infinitely changing thing. The early foray into it before he even cut an album. His father worked for a charity in the UK, but he worked in outreach and PR. So his father kind of knew PR.
Yeah.
And they came up with a shtick to kind of get the very early David Bowie, not even David Bowie, I think this was still Davy Jones at this point.
It was, yeah.
To get him on TV for these early versions of his bands.
Yes.
They created this organization called the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Long-Haired Men.
There's a video of this online.
This was in 1964. This is extremely Bob Einstein.
Yes.
Right? And I think that's why I wrote like Bob Einstein in large letters next to it.
They're tired of persecution. They're tired of taunt. A 17-year-old, Davy Jones, has just founded the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Long-Haired Men.
Well, I think we're all fairly tolerant, but for the last 2 years we've had comments like darling and can I carry a handbag thrown at us. And I think we all like long hair. And we don't see why other people should persecute us because of this.
This is Davy Jones as a nobody.
Yeah.
Right? But he still got on the BBC twice.
He's dead serious about it.
Yeah, and then they got a following on it so that, apparently Davy Jones was barred from playing some dance hall performance because his hair was too long. And he again goes and says, this is it. This is an example of prejudice. And there were actually some supporters that showed up and picketed this show with banners that said, "Be fair to long hair," outside of the BBC television center. So this was the early David Bowie as the theatric getting PR time. And funny as hell.
Yeah.
You can look at this now as 1964. If it were today, then perhaps that this is a different thing having to do with sexuality and gender roles and stuff like this. But no, this is 1964, and this is a pure ass joke.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah.
And it was funny.
Yeah. It's good. All right. I'll go number 5. I wrote relationship to time, prescience, and transience. He was ahead of the curve on a lot of things, most obviously gender fluidity. There's a moment that gets pointed out in 1975 when he's presenting a Grammy to Aretha Franklin.
Ladies and gentlemen, and others.
And the audience laughs, and he doesn't. And I mean, obviously, Ziggy is this deliberately androgynous image, and he plays with that idea and comes out and pronounces himself bisexual, even though he marries a woman. We'll get into all that later. But I do think one way or another, you have to understand him as being ahead of the curve on gender fluidity. He's right at the dead start of glam rock. He went disco early. He actually gets kind of a pass with the punk rock crowd because he was championing Iggy Pop, who was a kind of punk icon. He all but invents new wave. There's a video called Ashes to Ashes that's really worth a watch. You watch and you're like, wow, what a crazy MTV video. He came out with that and put a lot of production value into it 1 year before MTV even existed. He very famously called out MTV for not having black people.
Having watched MTV over the last few months, it's a solid enterprise and it's got a lot going for it. I'm just floored by the fact that so few black artists featured on it. Why is that?
I think that we're trying to move in that direction. The company is thinking in terms of narrow casting.
That's evident.
And then a lot of early internet work in terms of, he comes up with Bowie.net. He wins a Lifetime Webby Award in 2007. He's the first major artist to put a downloadable song online. All of these things are like years before anybody else was doing it. He was so ahead of the curve. So he is absolutely prescient, but he's also transient. He also recognizes that all of life is nothing but change, right? He's got a song called Changes, and it is very true to him for the entirety of his career that he's just not married to anything. Like, he creates and then dismisses and moves on to the next thing. This is the whole fierce forward-looking thing. I love that.
It's a non-attachment.
I think that's a great way of putting it, Amit. Non-attachment is a great way of putting it because we are all attached to the present. We are all like, when I am in a good mood, I'm like, how do I just keep this good mood for forever, right? When I create something I'm really proud of, how do I replicate that and do it again? What were the instructions last time? You know, and he's so comfortable with transience, and that makes him prescient, I think.
Yeah.
So that's my number 5.
Okay. I want to add one thing to timing.
Okay.
So his first hit, Space Oddity,
Yeah.
was released 4 days before Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon.
Yeah, there was some criticism that he was opportunistic about Space Oddity. Actually, let's recap 5 because I want to return to Space Oddity with my Malkovich moment.
Okay.
I said, picked up where the Beatles and Bob Dylan left off. You said...
persuasive through relatability.
And hummus. I said outer and inner space. You said...
funny PR machine.
Funny PR machine. And I said relationship to time, prescience, and transience. Fucking great list. Okay. Category 3.
Malkovich.
This category is named after the movie Being John Malkovich, in which people take a little portal into John Malkovich's mind and they can have a front row seat to his experiences. So this is building a little bit on the prescient thing. Space Oddity is the song that really becomes his first breakout. It sort of has 2 lives because he's with one manager who does a not great job of promoting it, and then he drops that person and gets another manager who kind of goes on a new campaign. And Space Oddity is the thing that really, I think any Bowie fan would say that's the first real hit, even though he had put out some albums before. The inspiration for that song came when he watched Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. It was actually a very specific scene in 2001. So, and David Bowie talks about going to that movie high. And there's a scene, and I don't know if you remember the scene, I don't know when the last time you saw the movie was, but when an astronaut calls back home, he's trying to call his wife, and he gets his little daughter, who's like this little 4 or 5-year-old girl. But it's basically like FaceTime. Now, this is 1969 that this movie comes out, right? That's actually the moment that Bowie points to with thinking about how lonely it has to be in space. That scene, everybody else who's watching it in that theater and everywhere else throughout time is mostly seeing like, oh, wow, to communicate through space. But what he's seeing there is alienation. What he's seeing is loneliness. What he's seeing is distance and how cut off and how scary and kind of horrible that is. And he takes that idea and brings it into what becomes Space Oddity.
Hello. How are you, Squirt?
Are you coming to my party tomorrow?
I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I can't.
Why not?
You know, Daddy's traveling. Very sorry about it, but I just can't.
Oh.
I'm gonna send you a very nice present, though. Have a nice birthday party tomorrow, too, huh?
All right.
I wonder, like, what led up to him seeing that interaction as kind of sad, you know, because it's not obviously sad, but he sees sadness in it. I love that he found a moment that the rest of us were missing and builds upon that. I think that that's something he does really, really well, right? There's a sensitivity that, you know, in his stoned brain in 1969 in a movie theater that's like, this would make a good song.
Yeah.
And it's the one that launches him.
Do you think he saw it as, you know, a way to tell a story of we're all lonely? Whether Major Tom is out in space or not, but this is a way for everyone else to sort of understand how loneliness is by an astronaut drifting into space.
I don't know. I think what often happens with creativity is that you create something mostly by instinct and mostly through intuition. And then if it finds a kind of value somehow, like then later you can say, this is what I think about what was going into that at the time. But I don't think you're conscious of it as you're putting it together. I don't think he's like, I want to capture the feeling of loneliness. Let me write this song. But I think later he saw that because that's the kind of thing he's drawn to. So I think it's only in reflection that that becomes clear. That's my Malkovich.
Good one. Okay. So that was 1969. So I'm only flash forwarding us 3 years to 1972. So are you aware of the Elvis Bowie connection?
Not really.
So Bowie was born on Elvis's 12th birthday. Bowie, from early on, always wanted to be a star, always fascinated with fame and the Hollywood machine. So he really latches on to people like Elvis, Little Richard especially. He absolutely loved. But he loved...
Which makes sense for the sort of androgynous nature of things, right? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so 1972, Ziggy Stardust has been created, invented. The album is out. This is what David Bowie exists as. And he wanted to go see Elvis. And so he gets an opportunity. There's a Madison Square Garden show that Elvis is playing at. And him and Mick Ronson, his guitar player, hop on a plane from London to New York to Madison Square Garden. And they have front row seats in the middle. Bowie is in full Ziggy Stardust regalia.
Yeah, the flame red mullet.
And you walk into a 1972 Elvis concert, that is going to stick out. And your seats are in the front, in the middle, thinking likely, I have arrived. I am a rock star. I am seeing my hero. I am in character. As he walks and struts to his seats. The crowd sort of all gazes at him. There's a bit of an eruption. He looks up at Elvis. Elvis shoots him a look that Bowie described as, sit the fuck down, who do you think you are? Those were not the words, but that's how Bowie described it. And so Bowie immediately just sits down and
just
later...
put in his place by Elvis?
Yes, and later describes it as absolutely humiliating and also unmissable. I love the duality of moments like that. Here I am, realizing the dream. Oh God, there's much more to go. And so I want to be inside the eyes and the feeling of the strut up. And then I want to be inside the eyes. I don't think I want to feel the letdown. But the fact that they can exist so close to each other, and I think what the brilliance of that moment is, goes exactly to the ever-changing part of David Bowie that you like. There is no arrival. Right? That it's the second you think you're there, you've got to look to how to let go of this moment and how to keep going. And that occurred to David Bowie in a matter of seconds as he walked into Madison Square Garden while Hound Dog was being played live.
I mean, what's so funny is like, you know, I was feeling perfectly confident in my flaming red mullet and androgynous spaceman outfit until Elvis gave me that look, and now I'm humiliated.
Yes.
You know, like, it's crazy where we're looking for validation and where we're getting it from. Because he's, at that point, getting it from the audience, but he's not getting it from Elvis.
And that's the only one that mattered at that point.
That's really good. All right. Good Malkovich. Let's pause for a word from our sponsor. Category 4, love and marriage. How many marriages? Also, how many kids? And is there anything public about these relationships? I'll lay it out real quick.
It's just going to take up the rest of the show.
It could. There's 2 wives. Angie Barrett, 1970 to 1980. Bowie was 23. They divorced in 1980 when he was 33. His son, Zoe, later changed his name to his birth name, Duncan, and took his, as you said, father's last name, Duncan Jones, director of Moon, which, have you seen that movie? That movie's awesome.
I haven't.
Oh, it's really worth a watch. Yeah, it's really cool. I actually listened to an interview with Duncan Jones on WTF, and he and his mother are totally estranged. She's like, I haven't talked to her. I'm not going to talk to her again. We'll get back to that. And then second wife, which pretty well known, Iman, they marry in 1992. David was roughly 45, and they're married until his death, age 69. So 24 years. By all accounts, an incredible marriage. I mean, we'll get more into it. I don't know if you saw the story of their wedding. They said they were going to do it on some island, and they secretly did it in Florence. They were just trying to throw the media off. There's only 70 people at his wedding. There's a quote from Eric Idle who said, I was sitting there and I saw Bono, Yoko Ono, and Brian Eno standing together in this like small, intimate crowd. Duncan, David's son, was the best man. The one daughter, Lexi, who's now a model. And then last thing I wanted to say before you and I talk about this, there was an interview with Iman where she talked about David Bowie. That is the whole reason I wanted to do this episode. Every time she speaks about him, I get emotional.
How often do you think of him now?
Every day and every minute.
I have a necklace that I'm wearing under here that has his name on it. A designer who was a friend of ours called Hedi Sliman sent me this, and I've worn it since that first week after David passed away. People say, your late husband. I said, don't call my husband late. He's not my late husband. He's my husband. He'll always be. He'll always be.
In fact, I had a friend like, have you listened to her talk about him? You should do that, and you guys should do Bowie on the show.
But what you're talking about is age 45 and onward.
Correct.
David Bowie. The age 18 to, say, 40-something is quite a story. The sex life, the open marriage, I mean, everything. It's so much of this man's life revolved around just sexual exploration,
yes,
removing all intimacy from it.
I think that's right. One of the biographies I read, the author, unfortunately, has passed away, Mark Spitz, he said, quote, history is littered with failed open marriages, including those of Sigmund Freud, Charles Darwin, Simone de Beauvoir, and Jean-Paul Sartre. Open marriages may be a genuinely progressive notion, but it's clearly easier in theory than in practice. I could not read this line without thinking of Tobias Funke and Arrested Development.
As a therapist, I have advised a number of couples to explore an open relationship where the couple remains emotionally committed, but free to explore extramarital encounters.
Well, did it work for those people?
No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
That's how I felt about reading David and Angie's marriage. This is weird. I'm sure you encountered the same thing. He was pretty open. Like, he said to her before they got married, you know, I don't love you.
Does that mean you have to separate yourself quite a lot from, say, falling in love and getting very involved with a person? You, as an artist, would have to give up quite a lot of your time to them.
Yes, and I can't do that.
That's what I was wondering, whether you do that.
No, love can't get quite in my way because I feel I shelter myself from it incredibly.
I think that there was a lot of sex and a lot of partying. I think that she, by all accounts, played an enormous role in sort of managing David Bowie's career in the early years.
Correct.
It also sounds like it became a really destructive marriage as the drugs got worse.
Rife with jealousy, too. They're doing this open marriage and, like, the openest of all marriages.
Yeah. He made a joke that they competed for the same guy, which is how they met.
Yeah. I mean, they were both openly bisexual, and they're both extremely promiscuous and extremely jealous of each other.
No, and I mean, I think you can make the case, and people will make the case, that for a period of time, David Bowie was a sex addict.
Yeah. So I want to back up a little bit. So at the rise of David Bowie in his early 20s, he made a public statement saying, I do not believe in love in its possessive form.
Yeah.
Right? He dates a lot. He sleeps around a lot. He is the ultimate 60s, 70s sort of type of rock star of every stereotype you want to believe about the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. He also gives an interview saying that I am gay, right? This was sometime in the early 70s. He declared himself gay before Elton John did.
He declared himself gay before anybody did.
Yeah, and gay at this point, like bisexual wasn't even that common of a term.
Right.
So by saying I'm gay, all you're saying is that I like men. He's not saying that I exclusively like men. He's just saying that I like men.
Yeah.
And so for decades, he had affairs, one-night stands, orgies with men and women. He liked young, he liked old. He certainly had a thing for Black people, both men and women. I mean, there's just these crazy life.
It does sound like he was largely drawn to women, like largely heterosexual, but wouldn't turn down homosexual encounters. He was comfortable with it, which I'm sort of amazed by it. How can you not be amazed by it?
That's a question. That's speculative.
Yeah.
There's a lot of accounts of men saying that they were pursued by David Bowie. It's not that he necessarily is approached and says yes. It's unknown.
Yeah.
And I don't think he was ever clear about that because he made this big pivot in his life.
Well, I think after he boards the rocket ship of fame in the early 70s, people are throwing themselves at him, men and women. And he's saying yes to a lot of that.
And he was shameless, too, about using it to advance his career.
Yes.
With record executives and producers and TV execs and whatnot.
In particular, his first manager was a gay man. And whether or not they had an affair or not, it was clear he kind of played upon that man's attraction to David Bowie in order to advance his career.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, with him and Angie, it seemed like it was horribly toxic.
When we say toxic, hang on. I mean, this is the summer of love. You know, this was a different time. I mean, I think that they were trying to be free artists. I think the relationship between the two of them turned toxic, if that's what you're saying. But
yes,
I'm not
turned. I'm not saying the falling in love was toxic.
Yeah, or even the promiscuity is necessarily toxic.
But I think performing this act of marriage and having no commitment behind it.
And bringing a child into the world.
And bringing a child into it. And then he'd put jealousy on top of jealousy because he would still date and partially commit to girlfriends or boyfriends while he was in marriage, who would then get jealous of somebody who's not even their spouse.
I mean, the other thing that has to be brought up here is his cocaine use. That takes off around the time Ziggy Stardust takes off. So that's 72. And he is like, I got a quote about this later about arguably did more cocaine than anybody else in the 1970s. Like, he is an addict through and through.
Yes.
I mean, did you watch any of that interview with Dick Cavett where he's like
I did, yes.
Sniffing the whole time? I mean, he's tweaking, man. It's a wonder he survived that decade. He would say as much, too.
Yeah, the entire thing was fueled with cocaine and sex.
Yeah.
And he was somehow married through it all.
All right, so that's the relationship. What are we talking about? Desirability?
You want to talk about the soulmate that he may have found in Iman and the bliss of that marriage for the last 24 years of his life.
Which is a lot.
We've previewed what came before that.
I think until Iman, he had a misguided idea of what love was.
Yes.
I think he would probably say as much. I don't think he found an equal or a soulmate prior to her. And I think he lived most of his life, from what I could see, in extreme gratitude that he did find that person. You know, did he have to go through all of this with Angie and with groupies and the cocaine use and the party heydays of the 60s and 70s to get there? I don't know. But I do think, like, I love that he does find what is, to me, unmistakable in terms of, like, soulmate stuff with Iman.
I think the David Bowie prior to age, he got married at 45. I think he met Iman at 43 or 44.
Yeah.
Before that, very much a sex addict, sees his path to joy in variety. Different genders, different races, different ages, different levels of fame, just basically curing the ennui.
Yeah.
And that's what he thought, and that's what he latched onto, and I think the cocaine really fueled that. What he found in the lesson that he came to learn, it took several decades till age of 45, was that the true love and the intimacy feels better, more fulfilling, and is in fact more joyous or dopamine producing or whatever you want to call than that. So he had to go through that journey perhaps to get there.
I think that's missing an important piece.
Okay.
The relationship with the audience. I think that there is also a desire to feel validation and fulfillment through the anonymous crowd, through the masses, through the performances. And I think it's fucking confusing because he becomes famous at 25 and stays super duper unbelievably famous for basically the rest of his life.
So what's your point as that relates to love?
I think it just confuses the question. I think if what love and intimacy are all about is how am I seen, and am I being seen in a way that is aspirational and is forward-gazing and is true to me and is authentic, and am I reciprocating that? It's one thing to be in that kind of relationship with single another individual, but if you add the experience of also having the masses on there, it confuses how you evaluate the what is important in any relationship question.
Do you know that feeling you get in a car when somebody's accelerating very, very fast and you're not driving? And you get that thing in your chest when you're being forced backwards and you think, ooh, and you're not sure whether you like it or not. It's that kind of feeling. That's what success was like. The first thrust of being totally unknown to being what seemed to be very quickly known. It was very frightening for me. And coping with it was something that I tried to do. And that's what happened. That was me coping.
You are not ready for love until you have some idea, like really clear idea of who you are. And I think David Bowie didn't have, for some pretty obvious reasons, a really clear idea of who he was until he was ready for it. I believe that she arrived at the right moment.
It takes some people a lot longer to get to who they are. And a lot of people don't know. A lot of people make that mistake. And that's what ends up really in a lot of failed marriages more than people think that it's, oh, we just didn't get along. It's, you don't really know yourself. And some people have to go through a lot more journeys and whatever to get there. I think if you're built like David Bowie and need the validation and you love the attention as much as he got it, because aside from being a rock star, he was also quite a beautiful man. Like, that's why everyone was throwing him at him, and he couldn't resist that.
Yeah.
Right? Those insecurities inside of him could not resist that.
Yeah.
And so, yes, he didn't know who he was. And the more famous he got and the more opportunities he got, the less he knew who he was.
That's right.
And so perhaps that's what he had to go through.
That's my point.
So the question I wanted to get at, so knowing this very colorful history that David Bowie had, how do you look at somebody like David Bowie, who had hundreds of sexual partners, both men and women, and you are a man? How does a partner look at it? And that's what I don't know. It confuses me, right? Because we self-impose limits because
there's another way of looking at this where she says, you have been searching everywhere on earth for me, and you found me.
What reminds you of him?
Literally everything. Literally, because I have his music, I have his pictures, and then my daughter, Lexi.
Do you still have something you're wanting, you're wishing for?
Yeah, if there is an afterlife, I'd like to see my husband again. That's the one I want. And don't make me cry. Yeah.
Is there more to talk about here? I mean, the answer is yes, but that's true with every category. I think we need to move on.
Yes. No, I'm okay.
Okay. Category 5, net worth. I saw 230 million.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
I don't have a lot to say about this.
Was it what you expected or higher or lower?
It was almost exactly what I expected. Given his stature, I felt really good about this number, and I didn't have a reaction to it. But he also talks about he's like, I'm not a car guy. I'm not a materialistic guy. Most of the money I make goes back into creative endeavors.
Yeah.
And it's just, winds up being a good investment. And a lot of philanthropy. And this was a George Michael thing, anonymous philanthropy.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Category 6, Simpsons, Saturday Night Live, or Hall of Fame. This category is a measure of how famous a person is. We include both guest appearances on SNL or The Simpsons, as well as impersonations. I'm going to go through this a little bit fast because it's actually only so interesting.
Okay.
I found 3 SNL appearances. There's a very famous one in 1979, this sort of German impressionist thing where he does Man Who Sold the World, the song that he had written back in 1969 or 70. That was on the Space Oddity album. But it's like one of the, some people describe it as one of the weirdest and best, SNL performances of all time. There was a 1990 appearance. This is around the time that he joined a band called Tin Machine. And then this one I actually remember in the moment, the 1999 25th anniversary. Did you see that?
I did. I don't remember his role in it.
He's there with Jerry Seinfeld introducing guests. It's actually a really Jerry Seinfeld says this.
Why are we out here together?
Well, I'm hosting the show next week, and you're the musical guest.
They'd like to have a couple of heavyweights to open the season.
Oh, yeah, baby.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big, big show.
Yep.
You going to sing Changes?
Yeah. Are you going to do the lost sock bit?
Yeah.
See you next week.
Yeah, see you.
Then, so those are the appearances as musical guest. He was parodied a lot. I saw a Bill Hader skit. Will Ferrell played him alongside John C. Reilly with the Little Drummer Boy parody.
Yes.
The whole Bing Crosby thing. I think there's probably more. I didn't keep looking. The Simpsons, he never voiced himself, which I was a little disappointed about.
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping he had, but there was at least 5 explicit references to David Bowie on episodes throughout the years. He does have a Hollywood star. He got it in 1997. It was a site of a lot of adoration when he died. I don't know if you saw this. He was on Arsenio Hall.
In 1993.
That's right.
The quadfecta.
Yeah, and this is actually sort of a famous appearance because he announced the death of Mick Ronson, who played the guitar on all the early 70s stuff on Ziggy.
And went to the Elvis show with him.
That's 72. Right. That's right. So that's it. And then there's 2 additional cameos we have to mention. The first is the SpongeBob SquarePants cameo. Yes. This is after he has his second child, and she's really into SpongeBob.
Gentlemen, what is art? Oh, I know! Art is what happens when you learn to dream. Go ahead, dream a little.
And then my favorite, the Extras episode with Ricky Gervais. Did you watch this?
What do you do?
I'm in a sitcom. It's called When the Whistle Blows. Have you seen it?
I haven't, no. Is it any good?
Nice shit.
Oh, just riffraff everywhere. I think I've sold out, to be honest, but yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, to keep your integrity when you're going for that first.
Little fat man who sold his soul.
The little
chubby little loser, national joke. Pathetic little fat man, no one's bloody laughing. The clown that no one laughs at, they all just wish he died.
This is fascinating. Turned down knighthood.
Oh.
Was offered to be Sir David Bowie and said no.
Wow. I wonder why.
He just said there's no point. That's what he said.
God, okay.
Other people that have done that, very, very few. Stephen Hawking also did it.
No shit.
The writer Aldous Huxley.
Aldous Huxley?
Yes.
Of Brave New World fame.
Yeah, so very few people do that. Like, you look up these lists of who has turned it down, and it's David Bowie's at the top of every single one of these lists. Second piece of fame.
Yeah.
Do you remember Dirty Rotten Scoundrels?
Oh, yeah.
Movie with Steve Martin and Martin Caine.
Love that movie.
We were moments away from that being David Bowie and Mick Jagger.
No.
Yeah, so they were apparently the director's preference, but they had deliberated and took a while to decide. They're going to maybe come around to Bowie and Jagger, but Bowie and Jagger being who they are, moved on to different things, and it ended up being Steve Martin
and Michael Caine. I think we're better off for it, but I love that.
I think so.
I love that. That's good stuff. Well, okay, so I don't think there's a whole lot.
We let off the show with saying this is indisputably the breath times death.
Super duper fucking famous. Category 7, over under. In this category, we look at the life expectancy for the year they were born to see if they beat the house odds and as a measure of grace. Life expectancy for a British male. This was a little hard. There's not like one website that has all these. Most of the stats started in 1950. I did find one that said 1945 and 1955. In 1945, it's 64.1. 1955, it's 67.66. He died at 69, so either way, he is over. But it felt pretty premature.
Yes.
And maybe it was just because he was secretive about his cancer.
Yeah.
He put out this album, Black Star. Album comes out, 2 days later he dies.
Yeah. So he's over, but tragically over.
Definitely tragic. Definitely shocking. Unmistakably graceful. He stayed a very handsome man throughout his life. I mean, into his mid and late 60s, he looked great.
Yep. Looked much better, actually, in
some ways,
in his 50s than he did.
Yeah, he looked a little more filled out.
30s.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, he looks like a waif. And, you know, in the mid-70s when he's 90 pounds and coked out of his mind and translucent. Yes, I agree. He looks better with a little bit of age. I don't know what to say.
Well, what about the album?
Black Star?
This is the one that he started to record after he knew he was dying?
Yes. The last one seems like it was put together with knowledge that this is the last work of a dying man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that a graceful act?
Yeah. Yeah, obviously, right?
Yeah, I think it's kind of brilliant.
I do too. It's haunting knowing that he's dying.
Look up here, I'm in heaven. I've got scars that can't be seen.
Even though this feels like a tragic death, given the hard-living lifestyle, I think he was lucky to make it this long.
Yes.
I think incredibly graceful. I think it's hard not to look at this life and say a pretty complete life.
Yeah, count your lucky stars.
Yeah.
That you made it.
Yeah. I think he did. I think that's why he kept going into space.
Yes.
Shall we pause?
Yeah.
All right. First of the inner life categories, man in the mirror. What did they think about their own reflection? I have never been more excited to talk about this category than David Bowie.
Yes.
I'm just going to read my notes, if I may, and then we can talk it out.
And let's just explain the category. This is not about physical appearance. This is about self-perception.
That's correct. I don't think I've ever struggled so much. The eye thing, I know, was an insecurity at first. He talked about that he had this one permanently dilated eye that his best friend, in a boxing match at age 14, because he was arguing about a girl.
Oh, not arguing. He stole the girl.
Yeah, I actually, he set up a date, and he's like, she's not going to make it, and he wouldn't met her.
Yeah.
This, to go back to my notes, he does ultimately gain confidence through fluidity, I think. And he's obviously a very attractive man. I think he looks in the mirror most days and either says, I guess that's me today, but only for today. Or he looks in the mirror and says, there's my reflection, but you and I both know that's not me. So ultimately, I think, yes, he does like his reflection, but only because he's willing to take it with a grain of salt. This is the whole transience thing, right? He's outwardly changing as much as he's inwardly changing. So I think he's good with it because he understands the limitations of the reflection. But God, I had to think about this one. What did you have here?
Yeah, I think we have different interpretations of the same thing.
Interesting.
So what I see is a man that was consistently on the brink of insanity, possibly for the first 40 to 50 years of his life.
Yeah.
Schizophrenia ran in his family.
Deeply. Yeah.
Killed many of his aunts.
Yes.
Via suicide. They were committed.
And his older brother, Terry. That's the big one.
Yeah, his older half-brother, Terry, who was very much a best friend, mentor, as much of an older brother can be.
And as much as any biography tries to pinpoint when did David Bowie become this creative force, they come back to Terry as the person who turned him on to Coltrane and to On the Road, Jack Kerouac. And he emulated him and was trying to catch up with Terry his whole life. But then Terry does eventually get institutionalized and eventually kills himself.
So he has schizophrenia running in the family. He has, one of his characters was named Aladdin Sane.
Yeah.
Which, Alad, insane.
Oh, I didn't put that together either.
Yeah,
Jesus.
it's very, very clever.
That's
so always on the brink of insanity, always changing his look, infinitely changing per the New York Times. Validation. Needs it.
Yeah, this man has really trying to fill a hole inside.
Yeah, so in the late 70s when he makes Young Americans.
Yeah.
Right. There are stories about that he had different occasions that John Lennon came over, I think once, Paul McCartney came over once, maybe, and Bob Dylan. And he played it for him and they're all like, turn it off, put on something else.
Yeah.
And he was just so despondent and hurt. He needed validation consistently. So I think he looks in the mirror, glances once and says, let's go change. The flip side of this virtue is maybe that's impermanence. Maybe that whatever I see now doesn't really matter because it's just what I see now, and whatever I change to be is what I'm going to see then.
Yeah.
But I don't think he could hold that gaze until well into the second half of his life.
Yeah.
And so I do not think he liked his
reflection
in the mirror. I think it benefited his career tremendously. I think physically he was attractive and beautiful throughout this whole thing, even when you called him translucent.
Yeah.
But as far as acceptance, I'm going no way.
The limitation of this category is binary and that we are summarizing a life, and that's impossible because I am certainly biasing this towards the later half because I don't disagree with anything you've said there.
Listen, Michael, the value is making the binary decision and then backing out into the reason.
Yeah.
Because that's where you get into the continuum.
Yeah.
Right. So we can forever debate going back and forth. But what is the strongest summation you have? There is value in making that and backing that out.
I also suspect that there is initially a fascination with the mirror for David Bowie.
Oh, even quoted like 9-year-old David Bowie. I love the mirror.
Yeah.
Is what he was saying.
Right. As opposed to, I don't know, Yogi Berra, who I think we both were like, hey, probably didn't give a shit. I do think that there is a inquiry happening there that is as fascinating as anybody we've had on the show.
Yeah.
Okay, next category, outgoing message. Like Man in the Mirror, we want to know how they felt about their own voice when they heard it on an answering machine or an outgoing voicemail. Also, would they have used the default setting and recorded it themselves? I'll let you go first.
Sound of the own voice. I mean, with a singer, this is always seems like it's a gimme. And I think it is with David Bowie because it's a beautiful voice, both in singing and in speaking. So I think it's an absolute yes.
He's also got a gentlemanly quality.
Yes.
I really think, and he's an engaged speaker. Like his interviews are great.
Absolutely, except for the 1974 Dick Cavett.
Well, and his deranged interviews are interesting.
They're wonderful.
Yeah.
The question is the vanity part.
Yeah.
Right? Is he too important to put it on there himself?
Yeah.
I think yes. I don't think he would. I don't think he's going to put it on there.
I disagree.
Really?
Yeah. I think he would have recorded his own voicemail in part because I do think he cares about his fans. And I think he cares about the people around him. And I think that they would not just want, the default setting. I think there's a generosity to him. You're saying he's too vain for it.
Yeah, in 2002, he gave an interview to Terry Gross on Fresh Air, and he says, "I should have sunset Ziggy Stardust a year or two before I did. I should have just put somebody else on there in a wig and had him play Ziggy, and I went and did my own thing." That's part of where I'm seeing this voicemail.
I see your point. He only played Ziggy for 18 months. I mean, it was actually a really short stint when it's all said and done. All right, next category.
Yep.
Category 10, regrets, public or private. What we really want to know is what, if anything, kept this person awake at night. For public, I just simply wrote 1984 to 1988. I think he regrets all 4 of those years.
His money-making pop years.
And he describes them as the Phil Collins years.
But it's commonly accepted that you lost your artistic thread in the 80s, and I've seen you describe it as your Phil Collins period. What happened there?
Poor old Phil. I wrote 2 albums where I felt I really pandered to an audience what I believed they wanted, and I think they were artistically disastrous because of that.
Tony DeFries, his manager in the early 70s, swindled him, essentially.
And let me just summarize why he regretted the Tony DeFries thing and how he got screwed. So Tony DeFries was a lawyer, or claimed to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And he basically told Bowie that I'm creating this management company and you get half of everything.
Right.
And then for 5+ years, Bowie went and lived the most lavish lifestyle possible, as did Tony DeFries.
Yeah.
So Bowie's cut was half after all of those expenses.
Right.
And his understanding, without checking the contract, was expenses first, come out, and then we split everything in half.
And they stayed mad at each other for the rest of their lives. By the way, the song Fame, did you know that was co-written with John Lennon?
I did. I learned in the research.
Yes,
I didn't know prior.
I didn't know that, but that song was written around the time that David Bowie discovers that he has no money because he's been fucked over by his manager. And then John Lennon, in addition to saying, let's write a song together, also is like, here's what you have to do to get out of this deal. You've got to get power. Like, John Lennon, totally takes his older brother role in his life and coaches him. The other thing that is sort of noteworthy about this, Under Pressure with Queen was 1980. And part of the reason David Bowie wanted to do it, and it said, do not include my name in the liner notes, is he didn't want Tony to get any of that money. So he just collaborated with Queen because he wanted to stay active as a musician, as a songwriter. Pops into studio in Switzerland to say hi to them and bangs out that song in one day. That's one of the more memorable Bowie songs. Okay. And then I think the third very big one is his son Duncan's formative years. This is also from the book. Although there's no way to measure this in any forensic sense, it's possible that David Bowie did more cocaine than anyone else in popular culture. The Eagles, Elton John, the Stones, Rick James, Oliver Stone, Hollywood Henderson, or Julie, your cruise director. I don't totally get that last bit, but I think Bowie, he when he sobers up, he's like, you cannot be in a relationship and have this kind of addiction. The late 70s is also, in some ways, his most interesting phase. This is the Berlin trilogy. He manages to get custody of Duncan, and it sounds like they spent a lot of time together in Switzerland, for a period of time as he's trying to rebuild his wealth. I guess reading between the lines, I'm sure with the amount of fame and just the lifestyle that there was only so much engagement, but it does sound like he was actually a more involved father after a period of time than you would have thought. And that absolutely seems the case with his second child.
Yes.
I mean, he's
he was immediately a father.
Yeah, and changing poopy diapers, it sounds like. I mean, and excited about it. And even saying, I am getting fulfillment and love at home, which is what allows me to be a creative out in the world and not really care how some of my music is perceived or received.
Yeah, lucky for him that Duncan Zoe doesn't speak ill of him and that they had a mended relationship and a very good relationship ultimately, because that could have gone way, way, way south.
And you would have expected it to. Just to say one more thing about the coke. I mean, he was so coked out, literally, that he had a witch on call. He actually got an exorcist to come to his house.
Because he was coked up and thought that he was inhabited by the devil.
And he thought that there were women who were trying to get him to impregnate, and the devil was going to come up. He got really affected by Rosemary's Baby. I mean, this is the whole thing about fascism. He's not a fascist, and he later totally backs away from these comments, but he was out of his mind in the mid-70s.
Yeah.
It's very hard to have relationships when you're doing drugs and drinking. For me personally, anyway. And you become closed off, unreceptive, insensitive, all the dreadful things that you've heard every other pop singer ever say. And I was very lucky that I found my way out of that. Mm-hmm. My relationships with my friends, my family, everybody around me are so good and have been for so many years now. I wouldn't do anything to destroy that again.
The other public regret I think you just actually hinted at was the fascist comments, but there was one specific time that he was captured wearing all black, waving to the crowds, but it looked very, very much like he was giving sort of a Nazi salute. And it was within
Heil Hitler, yeah.
It was within the same period that he made sort of apathetic remarks towards Hitler and the Nazis and saying something like a good idea about execution or something to that effect.
Yes, I did do a deep dive on that photograph, and that's pretty debunked. That looks like a freak moment where his hand happened to be in the air, and people made a lot out of this quote-unquote Nazi salute. He never did that anywhere else, and he's said over and over again, that's not what that was.
But the fact that he had the pro-fascist comments before that.
Correct.
So just don't mix cocaine and pro-fascism at all.
I agree.
You hear that, Donald Jr.?
One thing we're hearing. No comment.
Okay.
Private, the only one I had is in the 1980s, he did downplay his earlier claim of bisexuality and said it was one of the dumbest things I ever did was coming out as gay. That was at the time that the AIDS crisis was beginning to heat up. He later was very, very active about being part of charities that were fighting, the AIDS crisis, especially in Africa. But it's weird. I think his importance as a LGBTQ icon is unmistakable for its very existence, but it's not there in a lot of statements. He doesn't talk about it a whole hell of a lot. It almost feels kind of coincidental that he happened to be on the right side of these issues, because I think he's very clear that he's opportunistic about claiming homosexuality as an attention-seeking measure when he's trying to get famous in the late 60s and early 70s. And then I think to back away from it in a way to go more mainstream around the time of Let's Dance and some of the huge pop hits of the 80s, there is a betrayal there. And I speculate that that's a private regret.
So you're saying he regretted saying that he regretted it?
Correct.
Yeah, I agree with that because he was a gay icon. And what does that do to those people?
Yes.
This is what I had for private regrets, is that he led a lot of people astray. All of these lovers that he took on and claimed that they were now his girlfriend or they were now his boyfriend. And then, but he would continue to cheat on them. And there was a lot of broken hearts and there was a lot of tears. He was a pretty heartless bastard.
Yeah.
I think through that decade. And
I think he's selfish. Selfish leads to heartless.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe those are the same thing.
Aside from in romance, he used people. I mean, I think two people that I saw that said this were David Glenn, who was a guy from Deep Purple.
Yeah.
So David Bowie just, took him for what he needed and then threw him away.
Yeah.
And I think the same can be said for Mick Ronson, is what they said in the BBC documentary.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I mean, I think they did reconcile before Mick Ronson's death, and he did play on his last album. I do think that the first half of his life has the classic signs of selfishness run wild, an ego run wild, attention seeking at all costs with a tremendous amount of talent behind it, which is why he's able to make so many great hits. But all the behavior is pretty, detestable.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's a private regret.
I think that's a beautiful way to sum it up. It's just detestable behavior.
Yeah. Category 11. Good dreams, bad dreams. Does this person have a haunted look in the eye, something that suggests inner turmoil, inner demons, or unresolved trauma? So you alluded to this earlier. I really struggled because there is a lot of proximity to serious mental health, and I think that he does direct that energy to creative output, right? And I think that that's what I had a conversation with somebody the other day about Van Gogh, who has how would we describe Van Gogh's mental health conditions in some of his episodes today? I'm not even sure if we have a diagnosis, yet he's one of the greatest impressionists of all time. There is a relationship between madness, for want of a better word, and great art. And I do think that Bowie is right on that line, I think that there's a real fear for him of going crazy. The way he talks about gratitude in later years, I went good. I said this is sort of the opposite of Diego Maradona, where if I look into his eyes in the early years, those two-colored eyes, that dilated pupil, I do think I see demons and darkness and something really scaring him. And I look at those eyes in later years and I see self-acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to sum it up, God, it's so hard. I'm going to go good dreams.
Yeah.
What do you got here?
I went good. This may be unexpected.
Well, that was a more confident and resounding good than I expected.
Yeah, well, because I think I so confidently said no for Man in the Mirror. And I think you hit on the outlet. I think this guy had demons on the brink of his entire life up until the 90s and fear.
Yeah.
And I don't know that he resolved it. I think he tried to snort it or he tried to sleep with it. But he did have the outlets.
Yeah.
And I think he changed these personas and at least he was fleshing some of it out.
My characters came out from a need to not want to perform as myself. I mean, I had a long time of making a character out of everything I did because I really was very, very cautious and shy of my own self. You kind of imbue that doppelganger with all one's own fears and feelings of inadequacy, and you put them on the doppelganger. Then one day you presume that if you kill that doppelganger, you will be free of all these things. And of course that doesn't happen. I mean, when you think you've killed it off, they all are back in you, and you have to really address those things.
I think actually he slept well at night and he had good dreams and it was resolved.
His creative energy is not just in the studio and with a piano or with a guitar.
In the book I read, they described who are his rivals, and Mick Jagger was like a best frenemy type of thing.
Yeah.
Elton John was a rival at the time, but they said Andy Warhol was actually one of his biggest rivals.
Yeah.
Because that's the type of artist that Bowie was, is that, all sorts of different ways that he's reinventing and getting it out there and just trying to empty his mind. And for that, I'm awarding him good dreams.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer. All right, category 12, second to last category, cocktail, coffee, or cannabis. This is where we ask, which one would we most want to do with our dead celebrity? This may be a question of what kind of drug sounds like the most fun to partake with this person, or another philosophy is that a particular kind of drug might allow access to a part of them we are most curious about. You probably know exactly where I went, don't you? What do you think I did?
I think you went cannabis.
Oh, I went coffee.
Oh, okay.
Okay, good.
Because I sense genius. When I sense genius, I ask for coffee.
That's part of
Did I
it.
take it?
Yes.
Okay.
But I also think he's an engaging conversationalist. People talk about how they put him at ease. God, who was it? Maybe it was Trent Reznor's. No, it was Bono who said, most of the time you meet your heroes and they say never meet your heroes. It's like Bowie was the first person I met who became bigger and better after I got to know him. I think I would enjoy having a conversation with him about mass communication. I think his prescience around what mass media was going to be, what social media was going to be, what the relationship between... Have you seen that clip of him talking about the internet in the late 90s where he's like, this is going to change everything?
But what is it specifically about the internet? I mean, anybody can say anything.
There are always 2, 3, 4, 5 sides to every question. And that, I believe, has produced such a medium as the internet, which absolutely establishes and shows us that we are living in total fragmentation. I don't think we've even seen the tip of the iceberg. I think the potential of what the internet is going to do to society, both good and bad, is unimaginable. I think we're actually on the cusp of something exhilarating and terrifying.
It's just a tool, though, isn't it?
No, it's not. No. No, it's an alien life form.
I mean, he was way ahead of the curve. And I would just love to sit down and have coffee with him and have him direct my eyes. Because I don't know exactly what I want to be paying attention to these days. The things that he's attracted to as a fan of art are what I would most want to pick his brain about. So I went coffee. What'd you do?
Coffee. I mean, I just don't think the other substances would be any fun with him because he's just mastered them.
Yeah.
Too much. It's like, even if he comes out of sobriety, he's just gonna surpass and it's not gonna be any fun.
Yeah, it's funny. Like we talked about in the Diego Maradona episode, it's like, okay, obviously this, cocaine soccer god, it turned against him, but there was a time when it would have been fun. I'm not sure I ever really
I would have never wanted to.
Yeah, I don't know that I needed to partake in any David Bowie orgies.
Yes.
I'd just be scared of what might happen in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I went coffee, and what I want to know is his version of the narrative, right?
Of
so
his own story?
Yeah. So let's say you know nothing about David Bowie, but you see him from the year, 1995 onward.
Okay.
Right. You see a kind of old guy and a kind of lame-ish guy.
Yeah.
Right. I want to know how he looks back at the earlier times. Were they learning? Is there fondness? Is there regret? And I'm saying there's obviously some of all of that.
Yeah.
But I want to know his summation of it, because this is something I always wonder about, that you see You see young people anywhere, below the age of 35 or 40 or 50 or 20 or whatever, acting wild and crazy and selfish, and they leave a lot of people like hurt, and they seem to all make peace with it later. But I want to know how they actually look back at that time. Would you do it again the same way? Was it the right thing to do? Did it have to happen in order for you to find the peace that you found?
Okay, I think we've arrived. The Vanderbeek, named after James Vanderbeek, who famously said in Varsity Blues,
I don't want your life.
Ahmed, after everything we've talked about with David Bowie, the David Bowies.
I think the plural of Bowie is Bowie.
When he came up with it, he didn't even know how to pronounce it.
Bowie.
How are we
I don't even know how to pronounce it anymore. I've lost track. I always thought it was Bowie, but nobody in Scotland pronounces it like that. Pronounce it Bowie.
Bowie does work a little bit better. Well, do you want to be him or not?
I think we have to talk through a couple of things, at least myself, unless you're a little more resolute.
So I think that there's a lot of things that point to yes. I like the second half of life, and I want the second half of life to be better than the first half of life. The discovery of true love alone is maybe worth it. The fulfillment that he feels, that alone has me very, very won over, not to mention just, I think, some incredible music. Not all of it do I love, but I like a lot more of it than I did before getting ready for this episode. I don't think I have the same reticence that you have with the destruction that he left in his wake in the earlier part of his life. I like to believe in forgiveness, and I like to believe in self-forgiveness. The bigger thing is kind of the thing that hovers over all these conversations, the experience of fame. It looks especially exhausting here. And he is very clear on that. Like, I don't want anything to do with fame after he achieves it. There is a point in his life where he's all about it, where he is after it with a kind of hunger and ferocity and ambition that I think, people who talk about, I don't know what it was about him, but you just knew he was going to be famous. And I think that was true because he really wanted it. That occurs for him at age 25, and the remaining 44 years of his life, he had to deal with that very uncomfortable experience. But I also feel like he returns over and over again, almost without exception, to creativity, to art. And it's sort of like, I've got to get back to me. And he seems to be able to do that despite fame and despite the power and despite the very confusing self-perception he must have had both in front of the mirror as well as in front of the audiences. I'm a yes. I think this is an exciting life. I think it's also the arc of it I really, really like. And it's almost a yes despite the music. Like, it's almost indifferent to what the actual music is and was. I'm not saying yes because I'm a fan of Ziggy Stardust or a fan of Heroes or any of it. I'm saying yes because this looks like a really good way to spend your time on Earth, as best you can tell in any given moment. And ultimately arrives at, I think, a very universal and powerful truth about what it means to be in love and committed in love. He got there a little late, but it wasn't too late. And it looks like a very complete life. So, yes, I want your life, David Bowie.
I agree with so much of what you said. The culmination, the love is great. The life of art is great. I love the conclusion. I love how he dealt with the, let's just call them demons, the intersections he had with everything that really occurred since, like you said, since the Beatles and Dylan, not just musically, but artistically and cinematically.
Yeah.
Not great evidence of close friendships. There was the John Lennons and the Mick Jaggers, but there was the destruction. There was the torn friendships. I'm really holding on to that, and I'm going to come back to that in a second. I think he's lucky to have the relationship with his first child that he did. I think he irresponsibly got married and had that first child.
Yeah.
I agree in the power of forgiveness, but I don't think that erases pain. It just alleviates it. There's a line for me in there somewhere, and I can't draw where it is, but it seems like this 1970s David Bowie crossed it. in the way that he hurt people and misled people. And I heard it in a few voices, in a few quotes, and the end does not justify the means for me entirely on this one. I think that's where I am with this guy. And like you said, this is too much fame. He maybe had no choice but to be coked up for 10 years and claim to be exploring his sexuality when we still don't know whether that's what he was actually doing or if he was doing it for the attention or because he thought it was required of him.
Yeah.
I don't like it. And I don't think it's a path that I would want to walk through to get to that level of legacy, ingenious, and influence that he got to. And this is just not one that I'm willing to take today. So no, Davy Jones, I don't want your life. Michael, you are David Bowie. In front of you is St. Peter, the Unitarian proxy for the afterlife. You now have your opportunity to make a pitch.
St. Peter, there is no question that a lot of my adolescence, early 20s, younger years were selfish, self-seeking, ego-driven. I wanted fame. I think I wanted power. I wanted to indulge in a certain level of hedonism. But through that behavior, I was always trying to look inward. I was trying to fulfill some void inside me. And I used my body and my face and my likeness as a platform, as a canvas for experimentation. I think all of us ultimately are living lives of quiet desperation, and we're alone. And I think I offered myself in a way to everybody else so that people who did not feel seen would feel seen. I tried through art, creativity, music, performance, even miming, to express what it felt like inside so that two souls could connect, so that other souls could connect, and that we could all realize that this is just an illusion, that this is not real, and that we are all ultimately alone and connected. I think that's the great service I performed on planet Earth, and even a little bit beyond Earth when I could get there. So for that, I hope you'll let me in. Famous and Gravy listeners, before you leave, I have a request. If you are interested in participating in our opening quiz, where we reveal the dead celebrity, then send us an email. You can reach us at hello@famousandgravy.com. Send us an email. We can find time for a recording. It's usually pretty fun, and it only takes about 5 or 10 minutes. We love hearing from you, so if you're interested, drop us a note. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you're enjoying our show and you don't feel like emailing us, then tell your friends about us. You can find us on Twitter. Our handle is @famousandgravy. We also have a newsletter which you can sign up for on our website, famousandgravy.com. Famous and Gravy was created by Amit Kapoor and me, Michael Osborne. This episode was produced by Jacob Weiss. Original theme music by Kevin Strang. Thank you for listening. Tell your friends. See you next time.